Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Woo, the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, Dr. Brian Sovryn, here for Real-Time Sovryn, closing up 2024 rapidly. We're almost there, but 2025, man, is this going to be awesome. Also, this should be appearing on YouTube. Of course, I recently talked about how I got a strike on YouTube, leading to the inability for some time to not post on YouTube. But you would have only heard about that if you're actually also following the podcast feed, either via Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you happen to listen to it. In fact, on Spotify, you can also still get the video, which you might be seeing now, or hopefully are seeing now on YouTube as well. So coming to you from a very icy Ice Planet Zero, an extra icy Ice Planet Zero. I've been seeing some nice negative degrees here, Fahrenheit, of course. And one day we'll get out of the Imperial. Well, not that Imperial, not like that TIE Fighter poster behind me. But anyway, I want to take a moment to talk about really where some things stand in 2024, but I'm going to be very, very specific. I'm probably going to do more episodes like this now that we're rounding out 2024, just to kind of give an update on the state of some types of technology. And in this case, I actually want to talk about something that I've wanted to be a, consumer electronic category for a while. Actually, I'd love it if it was beyond consumer electronics, because I can recognize in myself that what inspired me to want this sort of thing was its use in fiction, not by consumers necessarily. And we're talking about the smartwatch, because it has both come a long way and at the same time gone nowhere near far enough. Ever since we started talking about smartwatches on Sovryn Tech, when the category got introduced years and years ago. In particular, I'm going to be talking about, I'll be comparing it with, Apple, with WatchOS, with Apple Watches, which I've also used. But I will be talking about Android smartwatches in particular here, just in where things are at. And I'll explain, I'll go over why exactly I'm talking about that. But there's a lot of different things to get into here. So right now, I guess to open it up, I am wearing, and yes, we're going to get into, by the way, before I go any further, yes, we're going to continue to cover the cybersecurity sub-series. That's going to go on. We're going to get into, password managers and things like this that I think are really important to go over. I guess I should open this up with saying that, are smartwatches part of a cybersecurity profile? At the end of the day, not really, because it's another device that could potentially, lead to, or could be a gateway into the rest of your, your digital identity and, your digital life, digital files, and so on. It could be, it's certainly, and we'll talk a little bit about this, where that fits in, but in some senses, it can be a part of your cybersecurity profile, depending upon what your tolerances are. Okay. And I will go over that. This is going to be a very informal conversation around it, because I don't think that there's a whole lot of formality to really talk about with smartwatches, because again, sure, they've come far, but then also they've gone nowhere near far enough. Okay, so right now, as I was about to say, right now, you can see, if you're watching the YouTube video or on Spotify, you can see that I am wearing a Pixel Watch 3, the 45 millimeter version, the larger one. I could get into personal taste as to why exactly I'm wearing this, and I probably will, in a minute. But of course, there are many companies now that make, smartwatches. The first thing to really say is, as far as if you're interested in what smartwatch should you actually be using, it really depends on, obviously, if you're using, an iPhone, okay. If you're using an iPhone, you want to use an Apple Watch. You can use other lower end, kind of trackers that function somewhat as a smartwatch. Some of them are very, very good, like the Mi Band series, particularly I think is the Mi Band 9, which I've worn traditionally as well, from Xiaomi. Those work very, very well, way better on Android, but they can kind of get the job done on iOS as well. Okay, but so that's really, in my opinion, the story and the options as far as, if you're using an iPhone. But if you're wanting to use a smartwatch and you're in the Android ecosystem, my opinion is, yes, you can go with a Mi Band if you want to go for a much lower price option that is still somewhat quality. And yes, are you handing over all of your data to the Chi-Coms? Yes, of course you are. So what did you expect? I mean, there's a conversation to get in around that, right? If you're the kind of person, because I know I have listeners that come from a very broad swath, okay, of ideologies. Like I have listeners who amazingly are into politics, believe it or not, and buy into some of the more, shall we say, mainstream, not to say that they're entirely unjustified, but the more mainstream concepts of, what you should be worrying about, who you should be worrying about, and so on. Like perhaps you buy into the narrative that you should be concerned about, the Chinese government for some reasons. And I get that. Okay. So, if you're of that bent, all right, if you feel that way, again, you don't need to worry about the Chinese people, but if you're worried about the Chinese government, okay, sure. Just like any government, of course you should worry about them because they're all completely unethical. Okay. And by design are the monopoly, use of force and violence, which, that should concern just about anybody that kind of institution exists. I don't know. Didn't you watch Lord of the Rings and learn the lesson about wearing the Ring of Power, that no one should have it? I guess a lot of people miss that one. Anyway, who knew Tolkien was an anarchist? Moving right along. So, if you're concerned about that sort of thing, then you might want to take a good hard look at, okay, what smartphone manufacturers do not operate, within China. Honestly, that leads you to, the Pixel series, right? Because Google does not play ball with China. And certainly there is a very interesting geopolitical conversation to have around that, especially considering what, with a new administration in the United States coming in 2025, well, anyway, there's a lot to say about that, and we don't have to get into that here, and I'm getting way off course. Okay, my point being is, if you want the best experience with a smartwatch, you basically want the manufacturer of your smartwatch to match the manufacturer of your smartphone. Okay. And as far as like how that interoperates with your PC, there's certainly conversations to have around that. I mean, what plays absolutely the best, with say Microsoft Windows? Well, Samsung does. Okay. If you wanted like the Apple experience, ecosystem experience, but you use Windows regularly, then Samsung is really the way to go. Okay. If you happen to be, and joy to you, if you happen to be of the Linux persuasion, then basically use anything that can function with KDE Connect, which is just a great piece of software. As far as interacting between your computer and your phone. KDE Connect is also available for Windows, but it's an incredible option for Linux users. Anyway, so you want to stick within like your best bet, and this is also a security concern. Your best bet is to use the the manufacturer of the smartwatch with the same manufacturer of your smartphone. Okay, so in this case, I am using right now, like this Pixel Watch 3 that I'm wearing is connected to a Pixel 9 Pro XL. Okay. And I'm not going to get into a review of that phone right now. I will just quite simply say that, yeah, I think it's the best Android phone on the market next to whatever Sony's latest, Xperia phones are, just because they still have 3.5 millimeter jacks and micro SD cards and all kinds of other great stuff. So, Sony's rocking. Like if you are into that old school style smartphone, I mean, that's the way to go. The only reason I don't regularly talk about Sony is because their software support is kind of lackluster. But the hardware itself is second to none. I mean, it's so fucking good. Anyway, so talking about Android, if you are, after you hear this conversation, if you are interested in getting a smartwatch, overall, minus what I just said about Sony, in my opinion, you really have three primary options, okay, to look at. You have OnePlus, right? Because they have they have their own smartwatches as well. So you have OnePlus, you have Samsung, of course, if you're into that ecosystem, okay, and you have Google's Pixel, basically. And that's, in my opinion, as far as Android phones go, like those are the three companies that I would stick as far as the phones go, and really as far as the smartwatches go. Now, Garmin also makes great smartwatches, okay, and I want to put that out there. But that's a far more enthusiast and, dare I say, very fitness minded, even though there is certainly some conversation to have around fitness with basically any smartphone or smartwatch, or even trackers like, say, the Mi Band from Xiaomi. Regardless, let's talk about this. Let's talk about smartwatches and what they can do. And again, some of these features, like, say, what I'm going to talk about with the Pixel Watch 3, really require you to also have a Pixel, a Pixel phone. Okay, that's why I say stick within the ecosystem. But once you're in, say, your chosen ecosystem, let's talk about a lot of the things that you can do. Now, it's important to bring up that Samsung's Galaxy, ecosystem does have a lot more options available to it than, say, Google's raw Pixel ecosystem. And the reason for that is Samsung, of course, controls the hardware completely. They have their own software that allows for varying things. Not only that, Samsung has its own app store, right? Yes, it fully functions with the Google Play Store, but it also has its own app store that is a lot more lax. And it's a lot more lax because they're trying to attract, unique apps that people will have to use the Samsung App Store, and then hopefully they become more and more, interested in just using that App Store. But there are things, say, that you can do with the Galaxy Watch that you can't do with the Pixel Watch. For one, you can actually install a web browser on on a Galaxy Watch, believe it or not, and you can literally browse the web. I mean, that's pretty impressive especially on such a small screen. Granted, the Galaxy Watch, or is it the Galaxy Watch Ultra? I mean, like, that has a bigger screen, to be sure, much like this 45 millimeter Pixel Watch 3 does. Okay. But still, going through and web browsing, that's a little tiny. And that gets into one of the kind of the first aspects of what has changed, but still hasn't gone far enough as far as smartwatches go. And that is, the screens are really small. Now, granted, we all have different size wrists, right? Which is part of the reason that multiple companies, including Google, make multiple sized smartwatches, right? They have a 41 millimeter and they have a 45 millimeter. In fact, they just added the 45 millimeter this year. Myself, I want the biggest fucking watch, and this was true before smartwatches. I want the biggest fucking watch you can find, okay, on my wrist. Now, I understand I'm a big guy. I have big wrists. It looks okay on me. Other people, it can look like some kind of clownish thing on you, I suppose. But I never really think that a huge watch looks bad on anybody, regardless of, of the size of their arms or their wrist in particular. But that said, smartwatches getting bigger, like, I am totally on board with smartwatches getting bigger screens. They have gotten significantly bigger. Okay. Even though it's just millimeters, those millimeters make worlds of difference. Okay, they have gotten a lot bigger than they were, but in my opinion, they could get even bigger. And the side benefit of bigger screen gets into the second point, which is battery. Okay, while battery life has gotten significantly better on most smartwatches, okay, if we had bigger screens on them, if they're bigger watches overall, the more battery, you could jam into these things, and that would only be a good thing. Okay. If you think, oh, wait, why am I talking about positives and negatives before, or positives before we even get into, like, what are the negative concerns around having a smartwatch that's constantly tracking you and all this stuff? Look, if you are really concerned about that, okay, you're just not getting a smartwatch. Flat out. In fact, you shouldn't even have a smartphone. I'm not saying that to be an ass. Okay. I'm just saying I'm well aware of these concerns. Okay. Like I am super, super well aware. All right. You may be asking me, in fact, I guess I'll address this quick right now. Brian, why, if Samsung has some of these extra abilities, within the Galaxy ecosystem, why aren't you using a Samsung? There's a lot to like about Samsung's ecosystem, like DeX on the smartphones, or, to turn your whole thing into a computer. I mean, that's dynamite. Okay. But I know for a fact that Samsung ultimately always has control of their hardware, and that they openly admitted, they put it into writing, into the quote unquote consumer contract, which is just you buying whatever device. They openly tell you they can brick anything you've got remotely if they want to at any time. That is not okay with me. Is this true for a lot of smartphones? Yes. The Pixel series, the reason I buy the Pixel series is because that is the one, yes, you can kind of open up any smartphone, kinda, okay, but the Pixel series is the one where it is able to be opened and rooted somewhat by design, and you can put alternative software and firmware onto a Pixel phone that will give you a much better chance of having complete control of that. Now, I mean, can the police shut off any smartphone at any time? Yeah, there's evidence to suggest that. Can governments around the world shut them off at any time? Is there an internet kill switch? Yep, sure, there's evidence to suggest all of that, or it's just true. Okay, but at the very least, I can take a lot more control over this device than I can, say, a Samsung phone, or even probably OnePlus. Okay, but that's besides the point. I'm just putting that out there. Okay, getting back to talking about smartwatches. So, yeah, I'd love for them to be bigger. Okay, I would love for them to have more battery life. I would love for them to have more functionality. Like, I mean, even though it could seem kind of impractical, to do web browsing, say on a smartphone. Again, there are people that do it, and I would at very least like to have the option if I'm using one, whatever that happens to be. Okay. I'm going to shift this up to talking about the Pixel Watch 3 in particulars. Okay. Because where things have gotten much better with smartwatches is, again, that battery life. Depending upon the amount of features that I'm using on the Pixel Watch 3, I can easily get a day and a half's battery life. I know. When you think about what Casio G-Shocks used to do, that's a fucking laugh, right? Because batteries on a Casio G-Shock, go for years, decades maybe, okay, or at least a decade. Or you even think about like Xiaomi's Mi Bands; those can go a month, depending upon the feature set that you're using. If you're using a lot of features, still you can easily get a week out of them. If you turn off sleep tracking and all these other things, yep, I 100% I get it. Okay. But for a full, for a smartwatch using all the features, sleep tracking, even always on display, which you can do with a Pixel Watch 3, among other things. Yeah, easily I can get through the day with, battery life left enough to also do sleep tracking. Okay. And then in the morning, sure, you got to charge it up. But anyway, that is a dramatic improvement, okay, from what smartwatches used to be. It used to be a challenge to have a smartwatch get through one day. Now, again, I turn off just a couple features, and I can easily get this Pixel Watch 3. It can go 2-3 days, even with an always-on display. Like, I mean, the battery life has gotten very impressive with these. Okay, now, to caveat this, or to grok this, I also have LTE connectivity on it. Okay, so it has cellular connectivity, which is going to get into my ultimate point of where smartwatches need to be, and then we're going to get into some finer points after that. Okay, to have cellular connectivity at any given time without without having your smartphone around, and that it can operate independently. This is maybe the primary area outside of battery life. Okay, where we can talk about it in that, okay, yeah, it's come a long way, but then also it hasn't gone far enough. Now, LTE capable smartwatches have been around for, at least the past 8 years. Okay. LG, I think, might have come out with the first ones that were capable of doing that even before I think Apple, had really done it, or maybe they were right about the same time. And, my issue overall, so part of the reason also that I'm using a Pixel Watch is that, so I use Google Fi, okay, as my, and we don't have to get into a conversation as to why to that, even though there is an important one to get into around particularly the Pixel ecosystem, because in my opinion, Google Fi is part of the Pixel ecosystem. Okay, like it's part of making it a secure ecosystem, because there's particular things that Google can do with their own hardware, but then also ultimately having control of their, of the mobile carrier, of the carrier network itself. Okay. So, with Google Fi, a Pixel Watch 3, and I think actually this works with Galaxy Watches as well, but I already talked about why I don't use Samsung. But a Pixel Watch 3, with cellular connectivity, you get that basically for free, with your plan. Okay. And it works exceptionally well. And this is where it actually bests for me, where that experience is besting what can be done with Apple's watches. So I used for quite some time, I used an Apple Watch Ultra 2, and the Ultra 2, I just couldn't, there was just always connectivity issues. And I wasn't using Google Fi. You can't use an Apple Watch with Google Fi. Okay. But there were always cellular connectivity issues all the time. And it just didn't, it really, and I've tried to look into this. I mean, I don't think I got a dud, but I couldn't get it to, forcibly download podcasts. I couldn't get it to, download audiobooks and everything. I mean, there were just, the cellular connectivity just didn't work. And this speaks to, kind of a broader point with smartwatches themselves is, if it needs the smartphone, I see it as kind of superfluous. I get it that if you just want it for notifications, or some health tracking, okay, I understand, but then in my opinion, it doesn't justify the price tag, especially on an Apple Ultra Watch, or Apple Watch Ultra 2, which $800? Like it just doesn't justify that price tag if the cellular connectivity isn't up to snuff. And I was using Verizon, understand, okay? And in the US, that's about the best as far as coverage goes. And that cellular connectivity just wasn't working. That's not an issue with the Pixel Watch 3. I've never been in a situation where I wasn't able to download podcasts, where I wasn't able to download audiobooks, or whatever the hell that I wanted to download with it. And let's talk about that for a second, because this gets into the battery life thing. This is where battery life does tank. So much, an area where I felt like years ago that smartwatches just weren't there yet. And it was really a matter of app support, I suppose. Okay. Was, for me, and everybody's different in their use cases. For me, the fitness tracking stuff and all that, okay, that's gotten a little bit better over the years. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. And that can be interesting if you're into that. All right. But for me, the main thing I want my smartwatch, as I've said for years and years and years on Sovryn Tech. Okay. I want my smartwatch to replace my smartphone. I don't want the smartphone. Okay. I don't want to carry the bulky damn thing around. I don't want to have to constantly look at it to get notifications. I don't want to have to turn the volume on to get notifications. And the thing's so fucking huge, you can barely carry it in your pocket. You practically have to have a purse, or a satchel these days. And you're not going to, feel the vibration from that. Oh man. There's so much I want to say about it. And I really only want to get notifications, from a couple things, right? Say, your messaging app or, whatever. Okay. I've said over the years, all I want is a device that does audiobooks, podcasts, music, and gives me the weather. Now, smartwatches in general have actually become that, where they really can just do that. Depending upon, now messaging platforms gets a little finicky. We'll have a little discussion around that as well. Okay. But by and large, smartwatches have gotten to the point where independently, okay, through cellular data, can download all of that, can download podcasts, can download audiobooks on Audible, whatever, can do the messaging, can handle phone calls, can do whatever, And you don't need the smartphone ultimately at all. Okay. And great. That's awesome that it can do all that. But what do you have to use? I mean, depending upon the watch now, in March of 2025, there's supposed to be a feature drop for the Pixel Watch 3 that will allow you to use the built-in Pixel's speaker. Okay. I think Apple Watch Series 10 now lets you use the built-in speaker to listen to media, say podcasts or audiobooks or music, whatever. Okay. That functionality is there. Okay. And really you can cheat it with the Pixel Watch as well. If you just like go into media controls after you start playing something, you can make it to where it does it automatically, but it's going to be an official feature, supposedly in the very near future. Okay. But here's the thing, you either have to use the watch's speaker or you have to use Bluetooth headphones. Both of those features are going to drain that battery like there's no tomorrow. Like I said, I can go 2-3 days even, without a charge, even using a lot of features. But boy, if I start downloading podcasts, I start downloading audiobooks, okay, or streaming music, and I'm listening to whether it's, using the speaker, which even on a smartphone, playing things through the built-in speaker on a smartphone drains a smartphone battery like nothing else. It's just as true for smartwatches. Okay. But unlike smartphones, when smartwatches are connected and constantly streaming audio to, more modern generation Bluetooth radios like, 5.1 to 5.4, okay, it drains the battery pretty hard to where, you might even have to charge that smartwatch in the middle of the day. That sucks. Okay, that's part of the reason that I wish the watches make them huge, make them even bigger. Okay, so I can have that gigantic battery in it. I mean, honestly, you ever go into, say, grocery stores or some other retail stores, and you'll see where people are, and you can buy these on Amazon, okay, where they're wrist straps that people wear where they put a smartphone into it and, they access it. It looks like something, wonderfully out of science fiction. Okay. Where the person is wearing a wrist gauntlet and has, controls for their Starship or something on it, whatever. Okay. And it kind of looks like that. Now, the issue is though, that smartphones have basically gotten so fucking huge that honestly becomes impractical. Okay. To where even me with bigger arms and actually fairly sizable forearms, it does look ridiculous to have a huge smartwatch, on your wrist like that. Unless we get to a future where we all start wearing wrist gauntlets and capes and all kinds of shit, which I am not opposed. I am far from opposed to that. Let's do it. Okay. But we're not there yet. Be the change you want to see in the world, Dr. Sovryn. I'll try. Okay. When will it become acceptable to wear swords on our backs too? I'm ready. So anyway, this is an area where I really, really wish this is where you want more battery, because they have that functionality. For example, on my Pixel Watch 3, I have Audible, I have Pocket Casts, I have YouTube Music. Spotify works on it as well. If you're into that, I'm not. Or you can use, Symphonium, where I can actually stream my Plex server to my watch. And all of that functions pretty well. And the Pixel Watch 3 itself has 32 gigs of storage, which you can put some offline playlists from YouTube Music on there and play that at any point. That does a little bit better for the battery life, but not that much better. I have Wearcasts, which lets me, side load, my own audiobooks that say aren't available via Audible. So most of the, minus say comic books or books themselves or something like that, but most of the media consumption that I normally do through a smartphone, I can now do on a smartwatch. This is a part where, we've come a long way. And it's, to me, it's very exciting. Okay. Again, for multiple reasons. One of them is, again, you don't have to carry around the damn phone with you. You just wear the watch. You can be fucking naked and you have it with you at all times. It's great. Because I like being naked a lot. Maybe not this time of year, but most of the time I want to be fucking naked. And I mean, it's one of the wonders of watches, that classic wearable technology that's been around for so long. Anyway, So, but this is an area, again, we got to get that battery life up to where this actually makes more sense, where it's a lot more viable. And I think that that's really going to happen over time. Like we're going to get there. Okay. Apple is just, Apple leads the direction that basically every smartphone company goes. Okay. And that includes Google. I mean, just look at the fucking Pixel 9. That whole series just looks like an iPhone with the better camera bar on the back and everything. And I'm not even complaining about that. I'm just saying, like, let's admit it. Okay. So regardless, Apple leads, the direction that the rest of the smartphone industry goes. And, they're really big on trying to justify the Apple Watch. And one of the ways that they justify it is they claim that, we're too glued to our phones. We can't keep looking at our phones. I mean, they're right, but they're right for the wrong reasons, right? Because they're right. but they're trying to sell the cure while creating the disease at the same time. They're right, but then they're not really condemning smartphones overall. And Tim Cook only talks like this because he wants to sell you an Apple Watch. As to where the real answer would be, yeah, let's kill the fucking smartphone and let's just, jam as much as we can into the smartwatch. And, we have like wireless streaming, okay, of video content that we can do, or, you have a supplementary device like something connected to your TV or whatever, where you really could, when you need to access a bigger screen, you could get a bigger screen to appear and stream it basically from your watch. Okay. Or, another thing that is unfortunate with smartwatches are the proprietary charging cables. I mean, that's a money-making scheme anytime you have proprietary charging cables. Just a fact of life. And Apple, talk about leading the charge, pun intended, they're the worst. Okay. I mean, eventually they had to give into USB-C, but, even then, that's really only on their smartphones, right? I mean, yes, it's also on their computers, but you get my point. Anyway, with the Apple Watch, that's not so. Smartwatches, pretty much all of them are big enough to include a USB-C connector, and that's really what they should have. And if they did have that, you could even connect, I know it might sound crazy, well, just take the watch off, connect just a dongle, that adapts to a monitor, a keyboard, mouse, even whatever, your entire computer could be on the smartwatch. Again, we're not there. And sadly, out of pure greed, I don't think that that's necessarily ever going to happen as much as I wish that it would. That's always been my dream and my excitement for a smartwatch. But like I said, I don't think it's going to, that we're ever really going to get there. I mean, and Apple seems to have admitted this as well, because they've come right out and told their investors that, we're probably never going to see another category like the iPhone. Like we're never going to see, something that brings the amount of money that the iPhone did. And so the iPhone's not going anywhere anytime soon. And thus, in general, smartphones aren't going to go anywhere anytime soon, as wonderful as it would be if they did. And that's not even getting into glasses overall. Okay, so back to smartwatches on this. Yes, that is the direction that I'd love for them to go. I don't think we're going to get there, but even if they were just the primary viable, as in viable through battery life, way that we were to consume a lot of, say, audio content, I think that'd be amazing. Okay. I mean, the other part is, could we get them to stream, Android Auto in our cars, or, CarPlay? Yeah, that'd be dynamite, but likely not going to happen. Again, these companies want to be able to sell you multiple devices. Why? Because they just make more fucking money with it, unfortunately. So that's the hump that we're probably never going to get over. And so these things are always going to be kind of, smartwatches will always be somewhat artificially limited in what they can do, because their insides are incredibly powerful, even compared to smartphones from just a few years ago. So all of that said, let's take a little moment and talk about, sleep tracking and fitness tracking overall. These are both things that, only if you're interested in them do they bother to make sense. And if you turn all of those kinds of features off, I mean, talk about great battery life. Yeah, you can get fucking great battery life. Now, I've been experimenting with, because you get like a free like 6-month Fitbit Plus subscription or whatever when you get a Pixel Watch 3. And I've been experimenting with, like, okay, is this going to tell me any interesting data that I should know? Because I've never really messed with that. I mean, I've used like Xiaomi's versions of it, and I don't know, like the data just wasn't that intriguing. But, Fitbit is trying to, I don't want to say push on you, but we'll just use that phrasing, push on you, like this larger wellness picture. And I'm curious what that could look like. Is it tracking the fuck out of me? Yep, you're totally right. They are. Okay. But would I have my smartphone with me anyway and it's doing all the same things? Yes. So it's not necessary, or most of the same things, yes, but it's not. So, I'm not exactly doubling down here. It's really just all the same data, just different devices. Anyway, I'm not justifying anything. I'm with you if you don't like that. I completely agree. I just want to know, as a tech journalist, how does this shit work? Does it actually benefit somebody? Is it worth the trade-off potentially in 2024 and 2025? It's a great question, And everybody always brings up, oh, the insurance companies are watching this shit, and you get a write-off on your premiums if you wear a Fitbit and all this stuff. Yeah, yep. We've heard all this, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. And is that going to be the deep dark future? And blah blah blah. Maybe. Okay, then the conversation changes at that point, obviously. But where we're at right now, okay, let's see if like knowing this information is actually useful. And I don't hear a lot of anarchists talk about this sort of stuff. I don't even hear a lot of privacy advocates, frankly, really talk about this stuff. Okay, do they talk about that it's tracking you? Sure, but do they ever actually, I guess the point I'm getting at is, I'm a very fitness-oriented guy, and this isn't always true, but a lot of tech enthusiasts, especially ones that do podcasts or that take the time to write shit out, often are not. They're not fitness oriented. They're not hardcore in the gym. They're not this and that. And so I'm not saying they're not out there. Of course they are. Okay. I'm just saying that I don't generally get good, solid, honest information from a perspective similar to mine to know if this stuff actually has any kind of real value. Okay. There's always the debate that these things suck at sleep tracking, but this is an area where a lot of this fitness tracking has gotten significantly better over the past few years with these devices. Again, everybody wants to compete with Apple. And Apple has made genuine strides in this area. Okay. When do we get to the point that we're really testing blood sugar levels and shit? Oh, I can't wait for that. But that's, that's a whole other conversation. Okay. What that looks like. Anyway. So, I want to know, and, after 6 months or so, it might actually end up not being that useful of information, and I will be telling you the instant that I feel that way. Okay, where I'm like, no, this actually didn't tell me anything interesting. This hasn't changed my the way that I live, or hasn't changed any of my habits. So I might end up just saying fuck it. At that point, then all of those features get turned off, and it becomes a very fancy way to receive notifications, but also, to still take calls, consume media, and whatever else if I don't want to primarily use my smartphone. Okay, so this is an area where in 2025, we'll be updating on this. Okay, but its ability to track these metrics has certainly gotten a lot more interesting. Of course, I've always said on Sovryn Tech, just listen to your fucking body. It'll tell you the story. Most people aren't necessarily able to do that. And I can understand why. Okay. One of the things that, like tracking my heart rate, this has been marginally useful for me. Okay. Since I started using it. And the reason being is, I am working so hard that, and I am so busy that no, I don't listen, over the past few months, I have not been listening to my body as well as I generally can. And I can admit that. I can be open about that. And this is part of that thing that I don't see this kind of honesty from a lot of online reviewers and other podcasts and YouTube channels and whatever else. Okay, I can be honest about that. And so being able to see my stress levels, or at least a marginal indicator of my stress level, has actually been incredibly helpful. Because, I don't have the mental bandwidth to keep track of this sort of thing. So that's why I'm saying for some people, this could be useful. Now, if my life were the way I wanted it, no, I don't need a fucking smartwatch to tell me how I feel. Right? Because I know how to access that. I know, what I can do when I have that kind of mental bandwidth. But, maybe that's not the case for many, for some, or, this is a gateway to them learning how to pay attention to that. Like they can see, oh, that's my heart rate. This is how I feel. Okay. Then I know in the future, this is how I feel. This is probably what my heart rate is. And I need to calm the fuck down, or I need to go, relax or go work out or whatever. Okay. Anyway, so, those features have become very good. I mean, it used to be like a lot of times heart rate tracking both would drain the battery to no end, but also could be wildly inaccurate. And with some devices, it still is. But I've noticed with the Pixel Watch 3, it's actually been incredibly accurate. So that's it. Other places that really I feel like the smartwatch is still kind of, falling behind. Honestly, there aren't that many. It's so close to doing everything that I really wanted to do, including, this is the part that blows my mind. I can actually type better on a smartwatch than I can on a smartphone. And what I mean by better, what does better mean? I can type with more precision, less mistakes. Now, am I being more intentional because I'm typing on such a small little keyboard? Maybe. But at the same time, it's kind of weird that the keyboard on my smartwatch is so much more accurate at picking up my touch typing than my smartphone. That's strange. Now, maybe that's a personal anecdote. I don't know. But if you're watching the video, I have pretty big fucking fingers, and I'm amazed at how well that works because those keys are really, really tiny on that smartwatch screen, but it works. And one thing I wish that more, like WhatsApp has an independent smartwatch app. Okay. That, works fairly well. I wish other apps had that. Google Messages would work really well on this. In fact, you can even look at pictures that get sent to you, all that different stuff. But I wish that Signal would make a smartwatch app, or Telegram used to, and there are third parties that can do this, but I wish there was more independent messaging apps available on the platform. Now, you can, through the notification system on your smartphone that mirrors to your watch, you can do replies and type them out right on your smartphone. Okay. But they're only replies, and you can't natively interact with, features on the platform, where you're responding with emoji or doing, forwarding or reply, all these different things just aren't really there. Okay. WhatsApp, has made that happen, and you even still continue to get that encryption level, okay, which is great. But it's still WhatsApp, and I understand if you're outside of the United States, you absolutely need WhatsApp. But anyway, so that's there. Email has become far more impressive on smartwatches as well. Though really in Android's ecosystem, it's basically down to Gmail and Outlook as far as having a more complete feature set that you can use, but it works really, really well. You can't always see everything that's in the email, or it can truncate it at times, which that can be, unfortunate. But it works pretty well. I mean, you could basically, because that's the other thing that a lot of people, before there were even smartphones, email on phones like say BlackBerry or others was a big deal. In fact, that was revolutionary. And smartwatches are able to do email now as well. This is what I'm saying. We're almost to that point where, yes, you could just use a smartwatch, but we're never really going to get there because, again, manufacturers, ecosystems they don't want less devices. They want more devices. So that's it. This gets to kind of a broader point, and then I'm going to wrap this up with saying, why did I go with the Pixel Watch 3? Or why did I even go with Android for that matter? Because that's really what it came down to. Okay. But, before we get there, okay, actually, you know what? Maybe let's do that. Let's talk about that. My reason, okay, for going with Android in this instance, I have to tell you, Because you might think, well, who even really wears a smartwatch? It's actually, if I wanted to use this term, it's actually kind of terrifying how many people wear smartwatches now. But what's really terrifying to me, it's not really terrifying. What's really terrifying to me, though, I'll use the term anyway, is it's like everybody wears an Apple Watch. Like fucking everybody. Now, granted, I'm in the US. If I left the US, I know it would be a completely different story, thankfully. Okay? And I say thankfully because I don't like monoculture. So everybody here, like, I mean, I'm seeing like 70 and 80-year-olds wearing Apple Watches. And, you know, I have to admit this. This might seem incredibly shallow and superficial, but I do my best to be absolutely honest with you people. To be forthright is the better term to use. I'll always be honest, but to be forthright. When I see, in general, the people that wear, like, Apple Watches, like, I just can't be in with the majority, man. like that's it. And when I think of, what I know, because I read all the press releases, I watch all of the, events, WWDC and the there wasn't a 10.4 event this year, Microsoft Build, all of that. I check it all out. I read all the press releases. I'm a tech journalist. It's what I do. Okay. And what I know that these things are for, and then honestly, like, I see a lot of the people that are wearing these things, and clearly they missed the messaging or whatever. And hey, you know what? Use your technology however the fuck you want. Okay, I got it. And this isn't true for everyone, right? I'm painting with a broad brush, okay, and I'm just saying that the bulk of people, not all, because there are people that are near and dear to me, and who I love and respect and who inspire me, okay, that are hardcore Apple users, and Satan bless them, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Okay. But I see so many of these people and I'm just like, holy fuck, no. Like a watch is a statement piece. A watch has always been a statement piece. A watch has been a statement piece for centuries. And like, I see the Apple Watch and I see the person and I'm just like, I don't want to be associated with that, right? I don't want to be one of the normies. And that's really what it feels like. And in fact, I'm going to quote somebody else, someone who I absolutely love. I'm going to quote somebody else in my life who said that, yeah, it used to be true that like wearing an Apple device or owning an Apple device, having an iPhone and all that, like that used to be a status symbol. And obviously we're not referencing like how it is in high school. Okay. But high school is not how the world should operate. So fuck that shit. That kids get shamed for having Android phones. Fuck you. Like, I know it's true, but that's deplorable activity. That's talk about being fucking shallow. That's nothing. I mean, what I'm saying now is nothing compared to that level of nonsense. Okay. But kids are mean. That said, okay. But the person's point was wonderfully that, having Apple devices used to be like a status symbol, like, they must have money that, they're doing this or that. But now it's actually kind of become the opposite in that having an Apple device is really like the way for, perhaps people not so well off to seem like they are well off. Like it's actually become the opposite effect. That having an Apple device doesn't mean you have money. It might actually mean the exact opposite. Now, do I give a shit about money? I've told you this a billion times. I don't care. Okay? It's just like, it just drives me up a goddamn wall. Like, there's a very big conversation to have around this. Okay? Around, what does a person's technology say about, how does that reflect on the person? What does it say about them? Right? And, look, we're humans. We judge people all the time. We're always judging. It's unavoidable. I don't care how many fucking NBC classes you go to. You will judge people. Yes, you will. It's ingrained. It's in your fucking genetics. You evolved this way, motherfucker. Okay? Accept it. Don't have to act on it, but fucking accept it that you do it. Understand it. Okay? And I can't help it. As somebody who's been in the tech space for his entire life, I can't help it but do it. And there's just this part of me that just does not want to be associated with the bulk of the people that fucking wear Apple Watches. Because so many of them don't look like the types that have any goddamn understanding of what the fuck that thing is, how it works, and how far you can push it and what you can do with it. I want to be associated with the tinkerers. I want to be associated with the guys with fucking solder smoke coming out of their garages. Now, do those people wear smartwatches? No, Satan bless them, right? But if I am to wear one, I want to be associated with the experimenters. I want to be associated, you get my point? Okay, that's why even when I was in the Apple ecosystem, over the past, a couple of years, few years actually, okay, when I was going for an Apple Watch, oh, no. I'm not wearing whatever regular Apple Watch. You get the Apple Watch Ultra on me because, do you get what I'm saying? Because supposedly that's for adventurers, but what the fuck does it mean when the goddamn cellular connection doesn't work? There's no adventure to be had, folks. Not like that. And if you want a real adventure, leave the shit at home. God damn it. Okay. So, now that I imagine I've offended some swath of my audience, but I really don't intend to. Okay, you know who you are. You are the tinkerers. Okay, you are the experimenters. You are the people on the bleeding edge of human existence overall. So I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the goddamn normies. I can't do it. I just can't do it. So I like to push the limits. And again, the Pixel Watch 3 overall has done very, very well for what I want it to do. If it just had that battery life, man, I'd almost never bring my smartphone around, except for the other part that I've come to quite enjoy. And that is, having that experience in my truck, in my vehicle. Where do you need that? No, because you could just do it through the smartphone. But then if the car's not doing it, then you still need the smartphone, right? But like, it would be so cool to have, wear your smartwatch. And this is my last point, and then we're going to wrap it up. It would be so cool to wear my smartwatch just wirelessly transmitted everything I wanted it to do, onto the touchscreen in my Ram 1500. Because that screen's big enough to do all kinds of shit. And actually, the thing I like about Android Auto way more than I like about CarPlay, even though CarPlay's great, solid as rock, okay? The thing I like about Android Auto is the prevalence of an on-screen keyboard. Fucking dynamite. Okay, anyway. So, boy, I didn't even get into like Google Assistant and all that stuff, but I feel like that's just like a whole other level of concerns that a lot of people who listen to me are very privacy conscious, and they don't begin to go down that road. And I totally hear you. Okay. I like using Google Assistant or Gemini, I suppose now overall. I like using that when I need to be hands-free, say in my truck, right? Where I don't want to be touching my smartphone. And even then it can be very touch and go. There's still a long way to go on that, but I think Gemini is looking in the proper direction for all of that. That I won't get into. I do want to do an episode where I talk about the state of like these different, what's the term now? Agentic AI. Okay. And that conversation is going to start off with, we should have never called the shit artificial intelligence. That's the biggest mistake, because that's going to hold back everything that this agentic technology can do. Anyway, because it has fucking nothing to do with empowering governments and all this great, no. Okay. So, really, no, like this concept of, say, agentic intelligence, again, which it should not be artificial intelligence. Maybe intelligence is the problem itself, but whatever. Like digital agents, what it can do for the person and how it can actually keep from doing things for government. Like there is an incredible conversation to have around that I'm going to have, that unfortunately we have so many people who are just like, holy shit, it's tracking my faces, blah, 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 blah. And you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater as far as what this technology can do. And it's unfortunate. Okay. Anyway, This kind of side plays into that, might be a natural segue into that conversation in another episode, but I want to talk about this here. Okay. And that is, I'm sure someone else has already used this term, so I don't want to go too far with it. Maybe I'll come up with my own term so I can talk about it without getting a fucking copyright slapped on me or something. But the idea of, we have concepts, right, of of a WAN, right? What's WAN? Wireless area network. LAN, what's LAN? Local area network, and so on. Okay. Really what I've come to very much realize using, say a smartwatch, having kind of this larger ecosystem, even though I don't use Pixel Buds just because they don't have any semi-in-ear ones. They're all like jam a giant butt plug into my ear, unfortunately, and I just can't go there. Okay. But after using Apple's ecosystem for a good long while, and also, my more recent experience in the Pixel ecosystem, and even how that can, on a more limited scope, interact with Windows, depending upon what software and apps you're using, or even better, how it can interact with, say with KDE Connect, how it can interact with Fedora KDE, which I like to use primarily. Okay. This concept of what could be called a PAN, and I know there's some listeners who really love hearing that term used. Not because of a frying pan either. But PAN, a personal area network, where it is all these things that just interact. It doesn't make, I don't like saying it makes you a cyborg, okay, because it shouldn't be that. But the way that your devices all interact with each other that you own, okay, it's this ecosystem play, right, that Apple's so big about and every other company is trying to copy. But very much, so you could say just ecosystem, but really, like, you have to understand it a little bit deeper. It is this PAN, this personal area network, okay, where all of these devices, say like I answer, I answer a phone call on my watch, okay, but it takes it automatically to the Bluetooth headphones that I have and that are actually connected to my smartphone, and just answers it on the smartphone, even though the watch could do it. But it knows what the best way to go is, what the most convenient way to go is to just use the speakers and mics that are next to my ears, right? With my, my JBL headphones. So, like this concept, and then, how all of this interacts and changes instantly when it's connected to my, to my RAM, to my truck. Again, this personal area network that you have, or the way that, again, using something like KDE Connect or whatever, we'll go to, say, a Linux laptop and, do these varying things. Like, this is a very different world that we kind of find ourselves in with that I don't think people are paying enough attention to. And I think you should pay attention to it because it will allow you to better control your own attention. Meaning that this could help you in the sense, now the best way to, what I'm getting at is, I've talked about many times the attention wars, right? And that, we're basically constantly being robbed of our attention. And talk about things that are genuinely terrifying. That is terrifying. Now, a great way to have control of your attention is to get rid of all these devices. But if for some reason, be it business, creativity, or the fact that, yeah, actually, I do like to listen to podcasts all fucking day long, or I do like to listen to music, blah, 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 or I do like to listen to audiobooks nonstop, and, yada, yada, yada. These things make these very, very plausible, right? No one is arguing for, I never, ever, 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 ever argued for, yeah, let's go back to, audiobooks on cassette tape. Nope, I don't want to go back to that. Ever. Or on CD, for that matter. Thank you. Okay, the MP3 is a wonderful thing. It really is. So, a lot of us may feel that, no, we do get benefits from this technology. Now, understanding your personal area network and actually offloading different areas of your attention to different devices can actually save your attention. Like, one of the best things for me about wearing a smartwatch, it has nothing to do with fitness. It completely has to do with the fact that the notifications that fucking matter and the content that I want to consume, podcasts, audiobooks, music, that fucking matters, only appears on my wrist. I could leave my smartphone anywhere else, wherever. I could go for a fucking walk. But to make sure that I get a message from the fucking hottest woman on the planet, that being my wife, whoop, I can get it anywhere, anytime. And I don't have to worry about hearing from all the dum-dums. That's not listeners, by the way. I don't have to worry about hearing from everything else, whether it's fucking political campaigners or whatever other horseshit, that ends up crossing my bow. That can all just sit in my smartwatch or smartphone, and it can sit there for fucking ever, and I don't care. Okay. Or it can stay on a specific browser, that I have installed on my computer, on my laptop, that only handles that part of the outside world, and then I have, of course, another browser that actually handles things that matter. So this idea of the personal area network and respecting that and understanding that and utilizing that to where your attention only gets disrupted with what actually you care about, is a pretty big deal. And also, again, the information and everything that you take in can be far more helpful. Maybe, what a smartwatch can do is genuinely helpful for you, and it's better than what a smartphone can provide to you. Okay. And so in that sense, you want it to be a part of your personal area network. And so that's that's a concept I want you to consider, is that, how do I bend this digital world to my will and make it fit my lifestyle, not me changing my lifestyle to fit my devices, have it go the other way around. And believe it or not, as crazy as it sounds, I think a smartwatch, even where it's not all the way, it's not where I think it should be, where I want it to go. And again, I can, admit that it probably never will. Even though it's not going to get there, okay, what it can do right now actually could be incredibly beneficial. Because you can still have what you need to engage with the rest of the world, but then you can have that ultra personal device that's a part of your personal area network, that you can kind of count on, to only give you what you want and what actually matters. So consider that with the smartwatch. Now I've been going for an hour. I think I said at the top this wasn't going to be a long conversation. What the hell am I talking about? I'm a professional goddamn podcaster. Of course it's going to be a long conversation. Everything is a long conversation. And there's so much more to really talk about. But I want you to, again, consider a lot of what I talked about here. I'm not telling you to go out and get a smartwatch. If you interact in the way that I talked about with a smartwatch and you can only do that through a smartphone, hey, fucking dynamite, man, and stick with that. Okay, again, having more devices can become a security problem. In fact, I did say I'd talk a little bit about security. I mean, one of the issues, particularly with, say, on Android, as far as I know, on Android, basically every smartwatch that uses Wear OS 5 just locks itself with a 4-digit PIN. That should be you should at least have the option to do a 6-digit. That's a problem. Okay, I can say that much. Beyond that, I don't know that there's a whole lot of cybersecurity concerns to have here. You're so capable of making sure that, the way that information displays and even what notifications appear on your smartwatch and so on, that I think you have a lot of granular control on that end. And really, like with Wear OS 5, which is the latest for Android, on Wear OS 5, like there's so much modification you can do, which I applaud. On these devices that I think, again, you have a lot more control, way more control than you do on watchOS, by the way. And I mean, like lots of these, and I mean, just the amount of, even if it's not fitness information, like a lot of the, what are they, I think on Apple, is Apple the one that calls it complications or whatever, but like lots of the little, like I have one that tells me the moon phases, when is sunrise, I have the weather, which again was one of the number one things that I wanted out of such a device anyway. Tell me the weather, battery life. Like there's so much stuff beyond fitness or notifications or anything like that. Of course, calendars on there, whatever. And I mean, another thing that I love about the Pixel Watch is depending upon which watch face you use, you can see like what you're listening to. There's a little circle that'll show you what podcast you're listening to or what album you're listening to or something like that. All the media controls. I mean, like all these little things have gotten so damn good. And I love that we're back to, last thing I'll say, I promise. I love that we're back to the crown on a watch, the little dial, is not exactly a click wheel like the iPod used to have, but it's pretty damn close. And I've always said that was like we ignored that interface at our peril, and I love that it's back, on some kind of device. And it really shows just how efficient that is and how useful that is to have basically a click wheel on the side of every smartwatch. I fucking love it. So anyway, that's it. A long way to go for smartwatches, but they're actually to the point where I think they're worth the money that you could spend on them, as long as you do it right. But keep all that in mind. Stick within the manufacturer's ecosystem if you want to maximize the ability, and I would even argue potentially maximize security, depending upon what company that we're talking about here. But that's really the best way to go. Again, most of what I said is also true for Apple Watch. Okay, so if that's your jam, that's your jam. And pay no attention to what I was saying earlier, because if you're listening to me, I sure as hell ain't talking about you. Okay, or I sure as hell ain't making fun of you. All right. So I will leave it at that, and more to come. And boy, I can't wait for 2025. Man, the things that I am cooking. I will see all of you, on the other side.